Hi, this is Matt Bisogno, and I'm in my den today, which, as you can see from a mess behind me, also doubles as our overflow room. A long overdue Q&A session some while ago actually, I asked you for your questions about Geegeez and Geegeez Gold particularly, and you were kind enough to send me a number of questions, and as I say, belatedly, I'd like to offer some answers to those questions. So straight into it. The first question comes from Ravi, who is a member on the free service, and his question is, for those of us on the free service, how can we quickly handicap a race, and what tools or skills do we need to know to do this? Well, Ravi, thank you for your question. I'm going to try and share my screen now. Hopefully this will work. Let's try this. That looks like it's working. So this is a free account. I have a free account set up as well as a paid one. And in real time, I'll take you through the cards and spend a couple of minutes showing various things. Now, it's quite late in the day on Monday. There are still a few races outstanding. Maybe we'll have a look at this 410 race of Wolverhampton. So this is what you see if you're a free subscriber. You have access to some of the icons in line, and you have access to some of the tabs at the top. Obviously there's no result yet, which is why that's grayed out. Full form filter is a really useful tool which is free, and I'll show you that in a second. But before I show you that, I just want to touch on a couple of things. The first one is if we look at the recent form, let's look at Ed de Giles's runner here. You may recognize the main body of this content as being the same as on the Racing Post. However, on the right hand side we have this part called Then What, which basically follows the runners from these races and shows how they've performed since in terms of wins and places. Now there's no finesse to it. I'm not talking about rises in class or anything of that nature, but it just gives you a view of whether there were winners, subsequent winners in the races. So for instance, on the 14th of November, Tijuca ran last in a handicap at Wolverhampton. Almost certainly didn't give its running that day, but the races worked out pretty well, with 8 of the 19 runners going on to place subsequently. He then, or she then, went on to win next time out at a big price, unsurprisingly, because they had absolutely no form. That race hasn't worked out very well, and the race where it was third last time out also hasn't worked out brilliantly. Now, that's not to say you can't win this race, of course, because I haven't looked at the form for the others, but that's one thing to look at, is the Then What. That's a free component to the service. The other thing to look at, you can also look at trainer and jockey form. So let's have a quick look at Ed de Giles. Clicking on the icon with the black suited man reveals our basic trainer form. We can see that in the last 30 days, Ed de Giles has only run 4 horses. 2 of them have won 50%, but we can also see that another one of them must have placed, because the place percentage is 75%. We can look at his course form for the last year, shows that he's been in good form at the track, with a 20% win strike rate and a profit of £19.75 at starting price. So those are good data for Ed de Giles. We can also look at Kieran O'Neill, who is the jockey, and clicking on the jockey icon gives you some good feedback on him. Again, we can see he's in good recent form too. So the connections are going well. The last thing I want to look at, which is another free component, is the full form filter. And this is a really powerful tool. So if we look at our friend Tijuca, we can see the horse's entire career form. Clicking on race entries, incidentally, will show any upcoming entries, just the one entry, which is this race. You click on the race form again, and what we can do is we can say, right, I'm only interested in his runs at this track. In actual fact, it's her. It's a filly, so I'm only interested in her runs at this track. And then just click the course button, and we can see that she's had 4 runs at the track, and she's run competitively twice and poorly twice. In fact, lost twice. There are no clues in it. I was just looking to see if she had a pace preference based on the in-running comments, which you can get by hovering over the race outcome, but she doesn't. So that's one thing we can do. We can also look at today's class. In fact, we can look at any combination of these. So we could look at class and jockey, and we can see that Kieran O'Neill has ridden her in this class 3 times, winning last time out. If we click the today button, that's a composite of distance, going and class, and again we can see that she's got that 1 win from 3 runs. If we wanted to only look at her handicap form, we could click the handicap radio button. Non-handicap form wouldn't really be relevant because this is a handicap race, but if we wanted to do that, we could look at that. If we only wanted to look at wins and places to see if we could see a pattern there, we could do that. And what we can see is that all of her winning and place form is on the all-weather. In actual fact, in the race summary here, we can see that, which is quite interesting, because she has run 6 times on the flat and never actually even made the frame. And so there are various things that we can do to slice and dice the data here, which add a lot of value. And one of the things I do sometimes is I will select today, which, as I said, is a composite of distance, going and class. And if you just choose the first entry in the race, that brings up that horse's form. And then what you can do, you can use your arrow keys on the keyboard, and you can quickly scroll through the runners in the race to see those that have got form and have got good form, or if you're a layer, bad form. And this is a really quick way just to get, I know, especially in exposed handicaps like this, just give you a really quick flavour for the race. So that's taken me, what, 10 seconds to go through however many runners there are there. You know, I'm not saying that's an end point for your form study, but if you're in a hurry, that's a really good way just to see if a horse is particularly suited by a set of circumstances that present themselves today. Okay, I think that's enough for that question. So those are some starting points there. One other thing to say is, if you're a free logged in member, you can enter the tipping league. So maybe I'll put 20 points on Tijuca just for fun. And as you can see, that tip's been placed now. If I click that, that's done. So that's that question. Right, let's move on to our next question, which is from Graham. Hi Matt, have you ever thought of doing an app for gold members for Android and smartphones? I have thought of it, and one of the problems with that is that the amount of data that we present on a page is actually quite a lot. So one of the big challenges that we have is working out which items we are most prepared to sacrifice in terms of not squeezing and squashing everything into a single view. It's actually quite a challenge, and it's one that's ongoing at the moment. What I would say is the website itself renders very well on tablet, less well on mobile, which involves a bit of pinching and scrolling, sadly. Still, it's perfectly functional on mobile, and when I'm out and about, I use it that way, and I know plenty of others do as well. So that's quite a verbose way of saying there's not really, in the short term, we don't propose to go down that route, although we will be looking at making the mobile provision a bit more user-friendly in the second part of the year. Okay, next question. Matt, there's another. This is a different Graham. I've been dabbling with Shortlist 15s and 12s, also handicap first run and trainer jockey combo stats recently. Do you keep any form of breakdown of results for these reports over time? We do have results for the Shortlist report. There is a link if you search for Geegeez Shortlist, a daily gold mine. You'll find a link to the results about a year ago. Clearly, I'm due an update post on that. The management summary is that, curiously, and I flagged some possible reasons for this in the post a year ago. The 10 scores have done very well. That's going to be 3 greens, an amber, and a grey. And as I say, do look at that post to see my ponderances on that. I'm certainly not suggesting that that's absolutely the case, but it could be. The 15s have continued to do well, although not really beating the market. They're about level pegging. The 12s, where the grey is for course, in other words, the horse has got a line of green except has never run at the course before. Those have continued to perform pretty well too, so they're worth a look. I mean, one thing I would say about the Shortlist is if you're really short of time, then you are going to sacrifice some of the value of Geegeez Gold in terms of the time you have available. So using the Shortlist as an end point rather than a start point is going to be an enjoyable way to engage with racing, and may well be profitable in a small way as well. I think if you're serious about making a profit from your Geegeez Gold subscription, then as with everything else, you're probably going to have to invest a bit more time, or else maybe focus solely on stat of the day and looking at the Shortlist in a slightly more considered way. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If I just flip over to screen share again, I'm still getting used to this technology, so bear with me. I think that's the right one. How are we doing there? No, that's the wrong one. Let's try again. Okay, that's the right one. Right, so what I would say about the Shortlist is, so this is logged in as a gold user now. Let's have a look at let's have a look at this 12 here in the 135. One of the things I'm interested in, and I've blogged about this in the past, is something called the contrast principle. And basically what I'm saying there is that I'm interested in a horse with a good amount of green in a race where most of the other runners don't have a good amount of green. In other words, a green line in a sea of red is something, it is more valuable to me than, for instance, in this case, a couple of horses with green and a couple of others with bits of green and orange. When I look at a race like this, I think it's potentially too competitive. Whereas if I see, and there may not be one, that I can immediately see. For instance, in this race, if there was a runner with a line of green, which there wouldn't be because it's a maiden race and therefore none of them would have won. But if I saw a runner with a line of green, then that would be an attractive proposition in the context of most of the others having summarily failed to win races so far. It's very easy to go through an entire card looking for this specific setup. Nothing at all at Ludlow. Let's have a look at Musselburgh very quickly, on the basis that we can do this very quickly. And again, it's a pretty uninspiring day's racing, and nothing in this context stands out. A Touch of Steel maybe would have been of minor interest in this race as a starting point anyway. Didn't run brilliantly, didn't run terribly, 6th of 14. But that's the general context anyway, and context is absolutely the operative word here. I'm looking for something with plenty of positives about it in a race where there are plenty of negatives about most or all of the opposition. So that's a bit of background on Instant Expert and the shortlist. Okay, next question. It's a question about stat of the day and double Dutch. I know you do regular summaries of recent performance, and there is a running total of performance since inception, but is there a link anywhere to a monthly breakdown of profit or loss? The answer to that is yes, there is, and that link is on the Join Geegeez tipping page. What I'll actually do is I'll put some links beneath this video when I post it to the blog, and then you'll be able to click those at your leisure and see the breakdown for yourself. Where are we now? 4th of Jan. I still need to update December's figures, and I'll try and get that done hopefully before I post this video to the blog. But if it's not there, then it will be soon, so do check back in the not too distant future. Next question is from Alan. With regard to Geegeez Gold and the Instant Expert, in order of importance, how would you rate the 5 headings? That's a really good question. And the 5 headings are going, class, course, distance, and field size. And there isn't a set answer for this really. All other things being equal, on a normal day's racing, on fairly standard going, I would say that class is the most important consideration. However, on an extreme of going, so for instance on a firm track at Bath or on a heavy track anywhere, I would say proven alacrity for the underfoot is worth probably 1, possibly even 2 class brackets, which in handicap company probably brings in pretty much every runner. In other words, if a horse has got good proven form in the conditions, on extremes of going, I would favour that over everything else. After class and going, distance form is important. I think one of the things you can do with the Instant Expert is you can use the drop downs above the grid to expand the ranges that are automatically displayed. And I think sometimes it's important to not pigeonhole a horse to a particular distance just because the grid displays it that way. Now the grid is doing the best job it can, but it's a fixed snapshot, and it's not offering you in that immediate view the versatility that you might need to have a proper handle on a horse's ability to last the distance. So you can use the drop downs just to expand the distance range to suit your own needs. That's what I would do anyway. Course and field size for me are the least material of the 5. However, they do sometimes highlight horses that have had a few attempts at a track, let's say, without success, or sometimes you can find a horse that does particularly well in small fields. Maybe oftentimes that's a front runner, which can get an easy lead and get away from them on the front. And occasionally you get a horse which has a very high cruising speed and generally does well in big fields because they tend to drop away left and right, and he just or she just keeps plodding on. So field size and course, they have their place, but for me, class and going are the most important 2. Distance would be next, and the other 2, we're really looking for horses that either blatantly don't perform under a given context or have shown that they do. I hope that makes sense. Okay, next question. Hi Matt, looking at the monthly returns of Saturday Day from inception, there seems to be a better return from the flat, in particular the summer months. Do you feel that the jumps does not lend itself quite as well to this methodology, or are the winter figures skewed by the all-weather tracks? Do you have any figures to separate flat jumps and all-weather? That's from Richard. I don't. My personal opinion is that, and actually this is all personal opinion because the short answer is we don't have those figures to separate out the different, race conditions. My personal opinion is that there should be no difference because it's a betting methodology. It's about the way that we look at the data, and there's no logical reason why that should lend itself better to flat turf racing than to all weather or to jump racing. So I think it's just the way it's been as the reason for the variance in performance, and I imagine over time that those variances will level themselves out. Obviously time will tell on that, but that's what I would expect. Okay, next question is another one about Saturday Day and Double Dutch. Is from William Gibson. I've been following Saturday Day as well as Double Dutch for a while, and where it's recommended to do 4 cross doubles on a Double Dutch. This leaves you with 3 out of 4 bets losing before racing begins. As the Saturday Day has such a good record, I've been combining it with the 4 bets from the Double Dutch, but doing 4 each way trixies, using the same stakes and making much more profit. Imagine the sublime result where the Saturday Day romps in and the 2 higher priced DDs win with the other 2 placing. There you have 4 winning trixies, 3 of them mixture of wins and places, and 1 striking gold. There's not really a question there, so it sounds very interesting, and I hope it's still going well, although actually knowing the number of placed horses we've had lately, it probably is. It's an interesting approach anyway. Next question. Do you or any members have a way of tackling staying races on the flat? That's an interesting question. Let's have a look at our Geegeez Gold screen share again, and let's see if I've got the right one. Got the wrong one again. Ever the professional. Okay, that's the right one, isn't it? Staying races on the flat. So yes, I do have a few ideas here. Let's see if there were any staying races today at Wolverhampton. No, let's have a look tomorrow then. Southwell, there's a 1.5 race there. It's in Lingfield. Here we are. So this race at Lingfield, which is 2 miles, less a few yards. What I do in a race like this, where the form is established, most of these are quite exposed, as you'll see from the instant expert grid. I definitely would look at that, but I'm interested in a couple of things here. First of all, is there a horse in the race that could potentially get an easy lead? And the answer is yes. Star-Crossed normally leads in its races, as you can maybe able to see from these figures. So Star-Crossed might be quite interesting, particularly in a race where nothing's done a massive speed figure. This SR column is the speed ratings. Star-Crossed has the second highest speed rating, and potentially could get a nice easy lead in order to apportion his energies consistently across the trip. Now that assumes that Star-Crossed is well suited to today's race conditions, and although he's run once at the track and once at the trip without making the frame, we shouldn't be too categorical about assuming he won't act on it after just one try. We can see that the grade and all weather is okay, and small fields is okay as well. Looking at full form again, over an extreme distance, we might want to look at distance, and specifically on the flat and all weather, because in this race there are a number of horses who have been running over jumps lately. And we can see, just by doing that quick scroll through, we can see that Todd has got some good form in this context, second at this track in recent time at the distance, whereas some of the others have perhaps underperformed relatively. The other thing to look at, which is interesting, could be the trainer angles, but in truth there isn't a lot in this race. What I'd normally look at is proven alacrity for the distance, and anything that might have a soft lead. So this Star-Crossed could be interesting. If the race was involved horses who had less attempts at longer distances, then you might want to look at the breeding information. A quick way to open all the breeding is to click or to open all of anything is to click the icon in the menu bar. So in this case, if I click the breeding and sales one, it opens that information for all runners. And if you were looking for stamina influences, the top one looks reasonable on stamina on the dam side. There's nothing that especially says it won't stay. So yeah, again, you know, these are exposed horses, and they know we know that most of them get 2 miles because they've done it before. But if we were looking at a group of unexposed maidens, for instance, or perhaps a novice hurdle where there are a few flat horses converting to jumps, then there might be a few more clues there about which could stay and which might not. Okay, it's getting noticeably darker here. I'm just going to pop the light on. Extremely professional performance here. I'm not sure that's made much difference, if any, but hopefully it has. Let's have a look at another question. Here's one. Yeah, if a horse in a shortlist scores 15 on a Friday evening and then the ground changes overnight, Will the shortlist be amended on a Saturday morning if the said horse does not have a good record on the new going? That's a really good question, and it relates to the way that that we run our reporting suite. Now we run our reports at 2 a.m. UK time, so the shortlist is populated using the information that we have at that time. Often, very often in fact, there will be going changes on the morning of racing. We cannot accommodate those in the reporting, which is why we recommend, or I recommend, that you click on any horse that you're interested in backing in the shortlist, and then go to the race itself and check that the going hasn't changed, because the race cards themselves are able to update the going with more recency than the shortlist report. I hope that makes sense. Basically, if you're going to have a bet based on the shortlist information, then you owe it to yourself to make sure that there are two variables which can change. The class will never change, the course will never change, the race distance will never change, or should never change. The number of runners and the going can change, and they often change as a consequence of each other. So for instance, if the going changes from soft to heavy, there may be a number of non-runners as a result of that. So field size and going can change. Again, if you're going to have a bet, everyone needs to be responsible for their own betting, and I certainly don't want to lecture anybody on that, but it's common sense that if you're going to have a bet, you need to make sure that the information you're using is absolutely current. We cannot always promise to do that, purely and simply because the data we receive from our supplier is not always delivered in a timely and up-to-date fashion. We are looking at a couple of ways to improve that, including using a separate feed for non-runners and going updates, but that's not in situ now. So the answer to the question is the report will not change after the 2 a.m. running of it. Whatever data we have in our database then is what's published on the shortlist. Do make sure to click through if you fancy a horse on the shortlist. Click through, check on the race card, maybe go to the BHA website and check for any updates there. Okay, that's that one. Another question. Hi Matt, when you receive a Geegeez tracker email, is it possible that our notes for the particular horse, jockey, etc., could be included too? Well, that's interesting, because since these questions were curated, we do factor that in now, and if I can find one that has the relevant data in it. Here's an example. Let's open this up, and if I do a quick screen share on this, where are we? I can't do that for some reason. Maybe I can do it this way. Let's try this. There. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but under horses, I've got notes for that horse. I've got some notes for the trainers that I'm following. No notes on the jockeys, but you get the idea. So basically, when you add a horse or a jockey or a trainer to your tracker, you can receive an email at 7 o'clock each evening. See, that one was sent yesterday at 7 o'clock, and it will tell you any of your tracked entries which are due to run the next day, and also your respective notes on each of them. So the answer to the question is yes, we can, and we now do publish your notes in your emails. Okay, happy to oblige on that one. It was a great suggestion actually, and that was from Paul George, but there were others who had made the same suggestion, so we were happy to incorporate that. What else have we got here? Last one, read Geegeez Gold, stat of the day. To obtain the best odds as advised, aside from drifting in betting with bog, it is crucial that selections are backed as soon as available, so the client's profit and loss figure at the end of the month matches as near the published P&L figures. The advice from the forum on obtaining the selections as soon as possible is to watch the Facebook and Twitter pages for updates. This, however, can be quite frustrating and time-consuming to me anyway. My question, can an email or even 2 separate messages for stat of the day and double Dutch be sent to subscribed gold clients at a set time, the day or night before racing? The emails could have details of just the time, meeting and selection, with the stats and reasoning being updated later on the site. This is a really common request, and it's something we've resisted thus far because we haven't had a way to separate out those that want to receive the emails from those that don't. It's certainly something that we will revisit in the future, though I make no promises that we'll introduce an email service. What I will say is that following Twitter, if you can set up alerts on Twitter. So if you use Twitter and if you follow us on there, you will get a message as soon as we've published. That's a really good way, actually, of getting the information in a timely fashion. I do acknowledge that there's an issue with the service doesn't deliver at a specific time every day. That's for purely human reasons. Chris, who does it, has a life to live and a family to look after, so can't always commit to a specific time each day. But if you do follow on Twitter or Facebook, you will get a very timely notification. And again, we will look at if there's a way that we can potentially create a sub list where we can email people that want to know when stat of the day is being published. I'm sure the technology is available, it's just not something that we currently are able to do. Okay, a bit of waffling in this. This was in real time. There was, as you may have guessed, there was no prep done ahead of the video, so it's massively ghetto, and you have my apologies for that. I hope at the very least there was some insights delivered. Quite a lot of it was about stat of the day and the shortlist, and I'm conscious that there's lots and lots more content on the site that I haven't really covered here. So what I'll probably do is a few more of these videos in future, maybe a bit more preconceived as well, around the reporting and various other tools on the site, because I think there's some confusion about what the value they have is, or that you need to be an expert, or you've got to have a lot of time to use them. My own opinion is that that's not the case. Now, obviously, I'm biased, and I, as somebody who's created the tools and the reports, I kind of understood them from the outset. But I will do my best to convince you, if you need convincing, that that there's utility and speed of digestion and accessibility in those other tools and reports. So that's for another day. For now, thank you very much for watching. If you got this far, you deserve a medal, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye for now.